On today's show, the NBA offseason has officially arrived. The Cavs have business to tend to, and Donovan Mitchell is the most important part of it.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, write a nice review for us, subscribe. Also free and available on YouTube. Hit that like button, smash the subscribe button as well. Coming at you live every single day on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add big to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cavaliers at places such as Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, other places as well from time to time. We've got a lot to get into, but as we know, on Monday night, the NBA season wrapped up. Boston Celtics, NBA champions. The offseason now is here for each team in the league. It's been here for the Cavs for a little while, but I think this is the perfect time to sort of reset what needs to happen for the Cavaliers this offseason. I think, obviously, the coaching search is still ongoing as I record this Tuesday night. I think it's going to wrap up shortly. I don't see why or how much longer this really should drag out. I think this is something that should be taken care of sooner rather than later. We'll dive into that coming up a little bit. There's the questions surrounding the core four with the Cavaliers. But first, the first thing that we need to talk about with the Cavs this offseason, priority number one for the organization, is locking up Donovan Mitchell to a contract extension. We all know the story with Donovan. He was acquired via trade with the Utah Jazz in September of 2022, has been an awesome member of the Cavaliers since that trade. He's got 1 year left on his deal and then a player option the year following, meaning that theoretically, if he doesn't, and I don't believe this is the world we're living in, but if he doesn't sign a contract extension with the Cavs, he could be a free agent next summer. He could turn down that player option and he could be a free agent, hit the open market, go to whatever team he chooses. Again, I don't believe that's going to be the case, but just to take a step back and look at where things stand and why this is so important. So the routes that this could go include just that exact scenario I laid out happening. Mitchell deciding to not sign a contract extension and instead signal to the Cavaliers that, he might like to be traded elsewhere, that he might like to go to a different situation, which I don't think is very likely. And third, the situation I think is the most likely to occur, and I think is the prevailing feeling at this point across the NBA, that Donovan Mitchell will sign an extension and stay in Cleveland. I believe that's going to be the case. I'm not saying Donovan Mitchell is going to be in Cleveland forever. I'm not saying Donovan Mitchell is going to finish his career as a member of the Cavs. But I believe Donovan Mitchell is going to sign a contract extension and stay in Cleveland. I think that there are a number of reasons why it makes sense for Donovan. Obviously, I don't need to talk about why it makes sense for the Cavs. He is a terrific player. When he's been in Cleveland, he's been a top 10 player in all of basketball. He's been awesome. I don't need to explain, why it makes sense for the Cavs to sign him to an extension. Anyone that watches this basketball team or just watches the NBA knows why that makes a ton of sense. But I think that there are a few reasons for Donovan that this makes a lot of sense as to why he should sign a contract extension here. The first reason, I don't think the Cavs are that far away. I'm not saying that they're only a move away from being the Boston Celtics, but I do think that we are in an era of the NBA right now where parity, I don't know if it's at an all-time high. I think that's probably a little foolish to say considering the 75 plus year history of the NBA. But parity in the NBA right now is higher than it's been in the last couple of decades, to where we've not had a repeat champion in 7 years at this point. The last repeat champion was the Golden State Warriors in 2017, 2018. So it's been a long time. 6 years, I guess, from this finals. It'll be 7 years next season since that's happened. Where, yeah, the Boston Celtics have been in a lot of conference finals, but you're not seeing a ton of teams that are just dominating the league. Boston was an awesome team this year, but who knows what's going to happen next year? And what I think the lesson to be learned from that for the Cavs is that the Cavs might not be as far away as at times we had thought they were. Like, yeah, they lost in the second round in a series that wasn't all that competitive. Certainly would have been more competitive had Donovan Mitchell been healthy, had Jarrett Allen been available to play for the Cavaliers. Those are things that could have made that series competitive, more competitive than it was, I should say. But I don't think the Cavs are that far away. Now, they're more than just 1 or 2 moves away, but they're not far off. And I think when you're in Donovan Mitchell's shoes, to where he's made a ton of money in his career, and he's going to continue to make a ton of money in his career. I don't know how long this extension that I expect to get signed will be for, but it's going to be, a ton of money. But for him, I really believe it's about being in a winning situation. And I think that the Cavs are that. And I think that the Cavs do have avenues to better their situation, increase their chances of winning. And when the era we are in right now in the NBA is there's not super teams, like Boston's really good. But this isn't the mid 2010s where, yes, the Cavs were part of it. And, happy anniversary for the Cavs title, which that is today, June 19th, as you're listening to this. We're not in that era where there are 2 teams that are head and shoulders above everybody else. Like, there were probably 5 or 6 teams this year that you could have told me they'll win the title, and I wouldn't have been stunned. I wouldn't have been all that surprised. Being in that era and having a player like Donovan Mitchell means that if the right moves are made on the margins, and those moves are not all that easy to always pull off, the Cavs can find themselves in that situation. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons as to why Donovan Mitchell signing this contract extension in Cleveland makes sense. Because the Cavs are in a winning situation. And sure, there are better situations across the NBA, but how many of those situations can trade everything that they would need to trade to acquire Donovan Mitchell and still be a championship contender? I don't think it's a high number. I'm not sure what the specific ones are. And I think that plays into this too. But I do expect that contract extension to be signed. I don't have a timetable as to when, but I think it is something that will get done. And while that might not be the first order of business that gets taken care of for the Cavs this summer, it is certainly the most important order of business for the Cavs to take care of this summer. Another one of the reasons as to why I think it makes a lot of sense for Donovan Mitchell to sign the extension, when a team such as the Cavs is offering you the amount of money that it's going to be offered, if it's the full thing, it's over $200 million. If they decide, if they agree upon the maximum number of years, it's over $200 million. If a team offers you that and you're an NBA player, take it. Just take it. Like, there's no reason not to. Yeah, maybe 2 years from now, you're ready for a change of scenery, but you want to have that money guaranteed and locked up. And anytime a team is saying, hey, we want to pay you $200+ million, I don't care who you are. If an NBA team is saying that, my advice, and this is not just to Donovan Mitchell, this is to every star in the NBA, every player in the NBA ever that will be offered that amount of money. My advice to you, as you're watching this, as you're listening to this, is to take that money. because we have seen guys that have taken that money and decided, you know what, this isn't for me. I want to figure this out somewhere else. That happens far more often than I wish it did in the NBA, but it happens in the NBA quite a bit. And I'm not saying that this is what that's what this situation will be, but it has to be part of the thought process if you are on the player side of this. It's, you know what? I'm happy here for now. I might not be happy here forever, but the extra $200 million is going to be really nice. And sure, there are other organizations that would love to give Donovan Mitchell that kind of money, but the Cavs are the one that I think is the best situation for him. So it's not just a financial thing. It's not just a best situation thing. It's a combination of both of those things. And those are two of the biggest reasons why I think Donovan Mitchell is going to sign a contract extension with the Cavs and be in Cleveland for the next several years. I can't predict how long. I can't predict that he's going to retire as a member of the Cavs, but I would expect him to be in Cleveland for the next several years. That is the biggest piece of the puzzle the Cavs need to figure out this offseason. And the next biggest piece of the puzzle isn't actually the coaching search. It's what are you going to do about the core four? That's next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Cavs, they need to level up to peak performance. eBay Motors can help level your vehicle up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, love some good style there. eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And this is very important here. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So we know that the coaching search is something that still needs to be figured out for the Cavs, and I will talk about that at the end of today's show. But the next most important thing following the Donovan Mitchell decision and contract extension for the Cavs to figure out is what to do about the core four. And I know this is something that I've talked about a lot here on Locked On Cavs. And I only talk about it so much because I think it's so important for the growth of this team. I really do. I think there are legitimate reasons, as I talked about earlier this week. One, to keep the core four together. I think that there are reasons for that. There are reasons it makes sense. Continuity is a rare thing in the NBA. It is. And you look at some teams, the team just won the title on Monday night, thanks to a lot of continuity. Now, they were able to add some really great players on the margins, the Boston Celtics were, but they've had some continuity. Their core has been continuous. Trying to emulate that, I don't think is the worst strategy in the world. I don't. But I do have some questions. I have questions as to if the core four sticks together, how do you get the most out of everybody? How is everybody that's part of that group? Because at the end of the day, with that group, I think there are 4 all-star players. I think Jarrett Allen is an all-star big man. I think Evan Mobley's going to be an all-star. I think Donovan Mitchell is a perennial all-star, all-NBA MVP candidate, even though I don't think he'll actually ever win an MVP. Darius Garland had an awful year. He had a nightmare of a season, but I still think he's an all-star caliber player. He's just got to build himself back up. How does this organization, how do the Cavs ensure that if all 4 of those guys remain in the picture, that the most is gotten out of all 4 of them? That's the question that needs to be asked if they are intent on keeping all 4 members of this core group together. That question needs to be asked Because if it's not, what's the point of keeping them together? What's the avenue to getting the most out of Evan Mobley, to allowing Evan to reach his ceiling if Jarrett Allen's on the floor next to him? If Donovan Mitchell signs his contract extension like so many people expect him to, what's the best way to get the most out of Darius Garland? Now, I think in the backcourt, we've seen it more, those two playing well together than we have in the front court. Because if you think back to the first year of Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland, I think he and Darius Garland coexisted pretty well. I thought that both of them played well. I thought it was the best basketball of Donovan's career. And while it might not technically have been the best basketball of Darius's career, he was a pretty similar player to the guy that was an all-star the year before. His usage just went down a little bit because he was playing with a superstar guard. And that's something that just tends to happen. But how do you get the most out of all four of those guys? That's the question that you need to ask. And right now, I think that searching for answers there is still okay. But if you do decide to separate them, which is the question that needs answered here, I don't know how difficult of a decision it is, but I wonder how much, there has been reporting, certainly at The Athletic, that if Mitchell does sign a contract extension, that Clutch Sports and Rich Paul might have a conversation with the Cavaliers about finding a new opportunity for Darius Garland, about seeking out a trade for him so that he can be maximized in another organization that maybe is in a little bit more need of a point guard, in need of somebody to carry the load offensively, that the Cavs are just not going to be in that position because of Donovan Mitchell. I understand it. I do. I get that. If I'm part of Darius Garland's camp, I totally understand that because he, I believe, is an awesome player still. I really, truly do think that. But I also understand that in Cleveland, it might not be the best situation for him to show just how good he is. It might not be. It's hard. It's really, really difficult for an NBA team to have two players, not at the same position, but similar skill set players, both be all-stars in the same year. You don't see that very often in the league. It's pretty rare to see two guards from the same team make an all-star team. It just doesn't happen all that frequently. It doesn't. I think it happens more in the front court than it does in the back court. But if Donovan Mitchell's going to be in Cleveland and going to be a perennial all-star, which I have to think most of us believe that he's going to be, what is there left for Darius? So is that maybe the move you want to make, or not necessarily want to make, but are nudged into making by Darius's agency? I don't know. Or do you turn to the front court and say, hey, Jarrett Allen's trade value is probably not going to be higher than it is this summer. He's coming off of an awesome year, even if the playoffs left a little bit to be desired, and there's been some questioning of his toughness for not receiving a pain-killing injection during the postseason to his ribs. I don't think that just decimated his value. I think he's still pretty sought after by a lot of NBA teams. So maybe you take that route and say, well, it's not that Jarrett's not awesome. It's that his value is so high, and maybe moving on from him and repurposing his talent into a similarly talented player on the wing will allow Evan Mobley to thrive and allow that situation to be better, especially offensively, even if maybe a little bit of a step back is taken on the defensive end of the floor. Maybe. I don't know. I think it would depend on who is replacing him and what else fills around the roster. But I think that that's something to think about if you're the Cavs and you're making this decision. But I think that's probably the second most important decision the Cavs have, or I guess not decision, because they're not making a decision on Donovan Mitchell's contract. They're willing to offer him whatever because he's that good and he's that important. Whatever contract demands and stipulations Donovan will have, I do not believe the Cavs would have any issue acquiescing to. I think that they are willing to give him whatever he wants. So I don't know that that qualifies for as a decision. But I think once that's settled, it allows the Cavs to take maybe a little bit of a closer look at this core four situation. There's one other thing the Cavs have to figure out, and this is the thing that I actually expect to be figured out first. That's the coaching situation. That's next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is presented to you by FanDuel. Summer is here. Finally, it's very, very warm here in Northeast Ohio, and FanDuel has you covered for all of your summer bets. Obviously, no more NBA. Can't bet on NBA until Summer League arrives, coming up next month, but there are still plenty of things to bet on. One of my favorite things to bet on using FanDuel is going through and selecting players in Major League Baseball that I think have a good chance to hit a home run. I think that's a really fun way to spend some time on FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, right now you can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So maybe you think the Cleveland Guardians are going to win today. Throw $5 down if you're a new customer at FanDuel. You get $200 in bonus bets if they come through and they win for you. $200 you can use to bet anything from baseball, WNBA, so on, whatever you desire. FanDuel will allow you to use those bonus bets. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. And you can add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So the Cavs are still in the process of hiring a head coach. And I'm at the point where truthfully, I am a little surprised with how long this search has taken. I thought that this search wouldn't necessarily be quick, but I didn't think that it would drag on to June 19th as we sit here and listen to this. I didn't think it would go that long. When Kobe Altman, Cavs president of basketball operations, spoke at his post-season media availability, and this was after they had relieved J.B. Bickerstaff of his duties. When he spoke, he said, we would like to have a coach in place by the draft, but that might be a little aggressive. And I was standing there thinking, that's a little more than a month before the draft. I didn't think a coaching search should take quite that long, but here we are, and it's been 3.5, 4 weeks that we've been waiting for any bit of news surrounding this. I will say I still think it's James Borrego that's going to be the guy. That is a guess. I'm not necessarily reporting that. That's a guess. But I think that he's going to be the guy the Cavs end up with. If it's not him, I would expect it to be Kenny Atkinson, because those are the two guys that we've heard about time and time again. We have heard from the start, the moment J.B. Bickerstaff was relieved of his duties, right? Woj reported the news first, and he said, Kenny Atkinson, James Borrego, two candidates to watch. When the Cavs brought in guys for in-person interviews, who were the first two names that were mentioned? Well, it was Kenny Atkinson and it was James Borrego. I think it's going to be Borrego. I've bounced back and forth. I think if you've been listening to the show since I started doing this just under 3 weeks ago, you know that Kenny Atkinson was the guy I wanted. As I've done more digging into this, I'm starting to come around more and more on James Borrego. I really like what he's done offensively at past stops. I love the fact that he's got history in San Antonio as part of what I think has been one of the best run organizations, not just in basketball, but all of sports. The fact that he has coached there, I do think is a pretty solid feather in his cap. I think that he can get the most out of teams that are led by guards. And there's no question about it, whether it's going to be just Donovan or just Darius or both of them. The Cavs are going to be a team that is led by a really dynamic guard. And I think having James Borrego able to do that would be a really good thing for the Cavs. I think he could help to figure out some of their offensive woes. And that's where I ultimately see this search ending up. But I'm a little bit surprised that we've not gotten to that point, that conclusion quite yet. I do think it will be sometime soon, though. The draft is next Thursday. I think that they will have someone in place prior to the NBA draft on June 26th. I do think that's where that will be. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Locked On Cavs. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. Of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I do want to remind you guys, I know there have been a lot of comments. I've gotten a lot on Twitter. I've checked some YouTube comments as well. Going to do a mailbag episode on Friday's show. So if you've got questions for Friday's show, you can either comment on this video below, right after you like it and subscribe, then drop a comment, or you can tweet me at Real D Cunningham, or of course at the show account at Locked On Cavs. So if you want a mailbag question to get answered on Friday, drop your comments, drop your questions. I will get to them later this week. Super, super excited for that. But thank you for hanging out with me today. We'll be back tomorrow trying to line up some draft things. I'm trying to get a guest on. It's been a little difficult scheduling wise, but I do promise draft content is coming soon. I know there are some draft questions in the mailbag, so that's going to be a big part of that too on Friday. But I will be back tomorrow with yet another show. Maybe we'll have a coaching update. We will see what the day brings for us. But have a great day, everybody. Enjoy your Cavaliers championship anniversary, as it is June 19th. I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Locked On Cavs.